Welcome to Chronicles at Dusk, where stories whisper you to sleep. Tonight, we invite you on a journey not just through time, but through the soul of a civilization that has endured for millennia, vast, ancient, and endlessly evolving. Long before the Great Wall stretched across the hills, before emperors wore silk and scholars held brushes like swords, before dragon myths curled through misty mountains. There was China, a cradle of humanity, where rivers carved destiny and dynasties rose like the morning sun. This is a land shaped by earth and spirit, by rice fields and river deltas, jade and bronze, poetry and silence, where harmony was not just hoped for, but built into every roof tile and carved into every character, where philosophy was born beneath the stars, and every dynasty told a new story of power, art, and change. From early stone tools to silk and steel, from oracle bones to gunpowder and paper, China's tale unfolds, vast as the land itself, deep as its rivers, and resilient as the people who've called it home. At Chronicles at Dusk, we tell stories for quiet evenings and thoughtful hearts. And tonight, we offer one of the oldest and most extraordinary ever told. So close your eyes, breathe in the dust of history and the scent of plum blossoms. Let time slow. We begin where river meets sky, and the spirit of China first began to stir. Paleolithic Era, about 1.7 million to 12,000 years ago. This is the very beginning of prehistoric China, a time long before cities, writing, or even memory, when only the land existed. Long before the name China came into being, early humans lived here, walking the earth beneath wide skies. Around 1.7 million years ago, one of our ancient relatives, Homo erectus, settled in what we now call Yunnan province. He lived in forests filled with strange animals, elephants called stegodon, ancient deer, cattle, and hyenas long gone from the world. It was a wild place, changing with the seasons, where life was about simply surviving day by day. Over time, others came. Farther north, near today's Beijing, early humans known as Peking Man made their home in caves like Zhou. There, they left behind simple stone tools and evidence of fire, small signs of a cleverness that helped them live and adapt. Between 700,000 and 400,000 years ago, they chipped stones to make scrapers and awls, shaping the world around them in small but important ways. All across the land that would one day be China, traces of these early humans remain. From Shanxi's high plateaus to Liaoning and Guangdong footprints, their presence is quietly recorded in the earth. Old campsites by rivers and caves like Mazhuanggu, Xiaochangliang, and Donggutuo tell stories of people who lived simply, moving with the land and seasons. By the Yellow River, in the quiet valleys of Shanxi, fire was first tamed. At Xihudu, there is evidence that over 1 million years ago, humans knew how to make fire, a gentle flame that brought warmth and safety in the dark. As time passed, humans slowly changed. Whether they came here from far away or grew here bit by bit, by about 120,000 years ago, early modern humans walked the hills of what is now Hunan province. In Fuyan Cave, fossilized teeth remain, a quiet reminder of those first steps. These early people shared their world with animals we no longer see, like a giant panda, a huge tapir, and a powerful kind of hyena. Their world was wide and mysterious, full of quiet wonder. Their tools became more refined. In Guanyindong Cave, people crafted stones carefully, showing skills passed down through many generations. For more than 1 million years, humans lived in harmony with the land, without cities or writing, but with fire, stones, and stories told through time. This was a long, peaceful beginning, a soft introduction to the story of civilization, a time when the land held its own memories and the first ancestors of China walked quietly beneath the open sky. Neolithic Era, about 10,000 years ago to 2000 BCE. As the great ice sheets slowly melted away and the earth grew warmer, life began to change quietly in the land we now call China. This was the New Stone Age, the Neolithic Era, a gentle time when people started to settle down instead of moving all the time. They began to grow their own food, slowly learning how to live with the land. Around 10,000 years ago, small communities started to plant seeds and care for the earth. In the south, near the wide Yangtze River, people planted the first grains of rice. These tiny grains, grown about 8,000 years ago, marked the beginning of a close friendship between people and the land that would last for thousands of years. In the north, on the dry, golden plains of the Yellow River, farmers learned to grow millet, patiently working the soil around 7,000 years ago. One early village called Jiahu, in the valleys of Henan, was home to people who built houses from mud and reeds, stored food carefully, made fermented drinks, and maybe even played simple bone flutes whose gentle music has now faded into the past. With farming came more food, and with more food came bigger communities. People began to live together, remember their stories, and express themselves. In the hills of Damadi, in what is now Ningxia, thousands of stone carvings tell quiet stories of the sun, moon, stars, and the animals they hunted or cared for. These simple pictures, made between 6,000 and 5,000 years ago, are like early voices reaching out from long ago. At places like Dadiwan, Banpo, and Jiahu, people made marks and symbols that weren't quite writing, but maybe the first steps toward it, little ways to share and remember. As time passed, villages grew bigger and more complex. Between 5,000 and 3,000 years ago, the Yangshao culture painted pretty spirals on their pottery and raised pigs and dogs in their yards. Later, the Longshan culture built walled towns and made shiny black pottery, and may have started to organize themselves in new ways. Down by the Yangtze River's delta, the Liangzhu culture created beautiful jade carvings, circles and squares that meant more than just shapes. They showed ideas about the world, about spirit, and about people's place in it all. Over the centuries, the gifts of the land grew richer. From the west came cattle and sheep along old trade routes. Wheat found its way into kitchens, though more slowly. Peaches and cherries sweetened the harvest. Chickens clucked in the yard, and dogs rested by the fireside. By the end of this time, China was no longer just small groups of people here and there. It was a patchwork of growing villages, each with their own ways of living, believing, and making life together. Each village added a thread to the story that would carry on for generations. This was a quiet kind of change, the age of planting, of settling, and of remembering. A soft beginning, not just for cities and kingdoms, but for the heart and spirit of a people learning to call this land home. The beginning of ancient China, the Xia Dynasty, around 2070 to 1600 BCE, long ago, in the quiet valley where the Yellow River winds through soft hills and fertile fields, a name comes gently from the past: Xia. The Xia Dynasty is remembered as the very first chapter in China's long story of kings and families who ruled the land. Stories about Xia come from old historians and ancient writings, though it sits somewhere between legend and history, a place where memories and reality meet. To many outside of China, Xia feels like a mystery. There's no writing found from that time, no stone tablets with names or dates, but in China's heart, Xia is more than just a story. It's the start of civilization itself, a special beginning. Underneath the stories, there are real places, like Erlitou in Henan province, where archaeologists found the remains of a city thought to be home to Xia's leaders. Discovered in 1959 and dated back to about 1900 to 1500 BCE, Erlitou was carefully built. Streets were planned, big buildings stood on strong earth foundations, and people made bronze tools and beautiful jade ornaments. These tell us there was a community with rules and rituals. Even though no writing has been found, you can see a sense of order in the way buildings and burial sites were arranged. And there are bronze vessels, shiny and carefully made, not just for everyday use, but for special ceremonies. These vessels connected people to their ancestors and the natural world. Later dynasties like Shang and Zhou would continue this tradition. Whether the stories of Yu the Great, the hero who is said to have controlled the floods and started the dynasty, are true or not, they show a people who wanted peace, safety, and a way to keep their world steady. In this way, Xia is more than a myth. It's an idea born from the land and memory, the first step toward kings and kingdoms. As the sun sets over the quiet ruins of Erlitou, we don't have all the answers, only a feeling of a society waking up to something new, something lasting. The Xia dynasty, whether real or remembered, is where the long story of China's dynasties begins. A soft beginning, shaped in bronze and mystery. The first light of a very old dream. The Shang Dynasty, around 1600 to 1046 BCE, time kept moving, and so did the quiet life in ancient China. From small villages by the rivers, something more lasting began to grow. Not just homes and farms, but traditions, memories, and the first signs of writing. This was the Shang Dynasty, though the people then might not have called it that. What we know comes from what they left behind. Not stories told out loud, but marks carved into bones and shells, hidden underground, waiting to be found long after their world grew still. At a place called Anyang, in the heart of the Yellow River Valley, people spoke to their ancestors using fire. They asked questions about the harvest, the weather, sickness, and new life. The answers were pressed into the smooth bones, their thoughts and hopes frozen in those tiny cracks. This was the start of China's written history. Kings ruled this land, 29 of them, old books say, each part of a long story of ceremony and leadership. They moved their homes many times, but the last capital, Yin, became a place full of power. Here, bronze was shaped not only for battle, but for special ceremonies. Big bronze vessels were made with care, filled with offerings, and lifted up to the sky in respect. Bronze was more than metal. It held memory and meaning. Farther away, to the southwest, at Sangxingdui, others made their own bronze art, tall masks and detailed altars, a different but shining culture. Maybe the Shang traded with them or watched from a distance. We don't really know. The past doesn't always tell us everything. Even with all their strength, the Shang didn't last forever. One day, their fires grew dim. The voices of the diviners fell silent. The last king saw his kingdom fade with time, but something stayed behind. The bones they carved, the bronze they made, the thoughts they sent up to the sky. These things remained, and through them, the voice of the Shang still whispers, soft as dust, steady as a quiet drum, beneath the earth. The Zhou Dynasty, 1045–256 BCE. Beginning of the Western Zhou period, 1046–771 BCE. As the days passed and the Shang faded into history, a new people began to rise. They were called the Zhou. Once watchers on the edge of the old world, they now stepped forward to guide a new one. Along the quiet banks of the Wei River, where soft winds moved through fields and low hills, the Zhou brought a vision of peace, of life lived in balance. They believed in something greater, a connection between heaven and earth. And when they stood firm in battle at a place called Muye, they claimed a new right to rule, something they called the mandate of heaven. It meant that the sky itself had given them permission to lead. They built two main cities, one near what we now call Xi'an, and another farther east. But instead of keeping power all to themselves, the Zhou shared it. They gave lands to their family and trusted allies. Like stars around the sun, many small states shone across the land, each guided by the Zhou. In these early years, things were steady. Rituals were respected. People followed the seasons to plant and harvest. The rulers were seen as a reflection of harmony. the will of heaven made real on earth, but time changes things. The Eastern Zhou, 770 to 56 BCE, Spring and Autumn Period, 770 sounds, 476 BCE, one day, trouble came. In 771 BCE, the western capital fell, the king was lost, and the royal court had to move east to a place called Luoyang. Though the Zhou still ruled, their power was not the same. This new time became known as the Eastern Zhou. The first part of this era is called the Spring and Autumn Period, named after a book that marked each year like soft petals falling one by one. Power began to break apart. Local lords, once loyal, started to act like kings themselves. Small states disappeared and large ones rose: Qi, Jin, Chu, and Wu. War became more common, though still shaped by old traditions and timing. Even so, something deeper began to grow, not in battlefields, but in thoughts. Wandering teachers walked the roads. They carried scrolls and ideas. Confucius spoke of kindness, respect, and duty. Laozi whispered about the Tao, a gentle way that flows through all things. Others shared different teachings: how to protect peace, how to lead, how to think. These ideas rose because the world was changing, and people were searching for meaning. When rules could not protect people, wisdom tried to. Warring States period, 475 221 BCE. At last, the old order faded. The Zhou name still stood, but no one followed it anymore. 7 great states faced each other now. This was the Warring States period, a time of fierce competition and ambition. Battles grew harsher and states grew stronger. They built tall walls and trained their armies well. They created systems to manage their lands, and even within each state, powerful families fought for control. Still, this was not just a time of war. It was also a time of learning. On bamboo slips, scholars wrote about numbers, the stars, and how to live. They kept histories and created new ideas about power and fairness. One scroll from 305 BCE held a multiplication table, simple and clear, showing just how much people understood even in such a wild time. And in the far west, one state was learning faster than the rest. It was called Qin. Qin's leaders were strict and clever. They built roads, changed laws, and gave rewards based on effort, not birth. Their ruler, Yingzheng, went to war and won. One by one, he defeated the other states. When all was done, he gave himself a new name, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. The Zhou had ruled for nearly 800 years. For much of that time, they led in name only, but their legacy stayed. They gave China its first deep ideas about justice and fairness. They inspired thinkers, dreamers, and wise men. They planted the idea that rulers must answer, not just to people, but to heaven. The Zhou are gone, but not forgotten. They are the gentle voice behind the sages, the quiet shape beneath the storm, the reminder that power must be kind and that wisdom often comes in times of change. Imperial China, 221 BCE, 1912 CE. Imperial China began with the unification of warring states under the Qin Dynasty in 221 BCE, marking the birth of a centralized empire ruled by emperors known as the Sons of Heaven, who were believed to maintain harmony between heaven and earth. Spanning over 2 millennia, this era witnessed cycles of unity and fragmentation, growth and decline. Throughout, a shared cultural identity endured, rooted in a common written language, ancestral wisdom, and a vision of a unified realm. Some dynasties flourished, fostering remarkable achievements in poetry, philosophy, science, and governance. Others waned, their influence fading like weathered stone. Yet the idea of a central imperial authority remained constant, weaving continuity through centuries of change. Imperial China's story is not only told through its conquests and rulers, but also through its art, ideas, and enduring traditions, forming a legacy that shaped the world and continues to resonate today. This grand saga begins with the first emperor of a united China, Qin Shi Huang. His reign set the foundations for what would become one of history's longest-lasting empires. Early Imperial China, the Qin Dynasty, 221 BCE, 206 BCE. This was the beginning of early Imperial China, a turning point when the land, once divided among rival kingdoms, came under the rule of a single emperor. That emperor was Qin Shi Huang, a leader with a vision as vast as the land he governed. From the wind-swept plains of the north to the green hills of the south, he brought unity where there had been only conflict. He believed in strength, order, and permanence. And with determination, he set out to build a China that would last. He connected distant regions with wide, straight roads. He established one system of writing, so people from all corners of the empire could understand one another. He set standards for weights and measures, ensuring fairness in trade and clarity in governance. And on the northern frontiers, he ordered the construction of massive walls stretching far into the horizon, meant to keep watch over the unknown beyond. Beneath the ground, craftsmen shaped an entire army from clay. Thousands of life-size soldiers stood ready, forever guarding the emperor's tomb. This terracotta army reflected his desire for protection, even in death. But the emperor's rule was strict. Old traditions were swept away. Books were burned. Voices that challenged his authority were silenced. For Qin Shi Huang, peace and unity were worth the price of control. Though the Qin dynasty was brief, it left behind a powerful legacy. The systems he put in place, roads, laws, writing, and governance, set the structure for future dynasties. And while his empire did not last, his influence stretched far beyond his time. Qin Shi Huang ruled with unshakable will, and through that will, the idea of a united China took root. After the fall of the Qin, the land once again fell into conflict. From that uncertainty rose a man named Liu Bang, an unlikely leader from humble roots. through determination and careful alliances, he emerged victorious, founding a new dynasty, the Han. With his rise began one of China's most celebrated eras. The Han Dynasty brought stability, prosperity, and cultural flourishing. From the capital at Chang'an, imperial authority reached deep into every region, supported by an organized bureaucracy that helped maintain order and collect knowledge across the land. It was a time when ideas guided governance. Confucianism, with its quiet emphasis on respect, duty, and moral leadership, was embraced by the state. Scholars were trained in these teachings, and imperial academies were founded to ensure that those who governed did so with wisdom and virtue. Under Emperor Wu, the Han Dynasty reached its greatest heights. He was a powerful and ambitious ruler who expanded the empire's borders and influence. To the north, he sent armies to challenge the Xiongnu, nomadic horsemen who had long threatened China's frontiers. To the west, he dispatched envoys like Zhang Qian, who helped open the Silk Road, a vast network of trade routes that would one day link China to lands as far as Rome. The Han also looked to the south, extending their reach beyond the Yangtze River into regions rich with different peoples and traditions. Through diplomacy and conquest, new lands were drawn into the growing empire, and connections with Southeast Asia began to take shape. This was a time of great creativity. Art, poetry, and science flourished. New technologies were developed, and historical records were carefully written down, helping to preserve China's story for generations to come. But with such ambition came strain. Military campaigns were costly, and over time, the empire's wealth grew uneven. Large estates swallowed up farmland, and power drifted into the hands of wealthy families. Inside the palace, political struggles and the rise of powerful court factions slowly weakened the center of authority. Though the Han remained, the balance it had achieved began to shift. Shadows gathered at the edges of power, preparing the way for a brief disruption: the rise of Wang Mang and the Xin Dynasty. The golden light of the Western Han would dim for a time, but the legacy it left behind of governance, culture, and unity would continue to shape China for centuries. The Western Han Dynasty, 206 BCE, 9 CE, after the fall of the Qin Dynasty, China was once again fractured and uncertain. From this chaos emerged Liu Bang, an unlikely leader from humble origins, who united the land and founded the Han Dynasty. This new era marked the beginning of one of China's most celebrated and enduring dynasties. The Western Han established its capital at Chang'an, from where imperial authority extended throughout the empire, supported by a sophisticated bureaucracy. Confucianism was embraced as the guiding philosophy, shaping governance and society with an emphasis on respect, duty, and moral leadership. Imperial academies trained scholars to serve the state with wisdom and virtue. Under Emperor Wu, the dynasty's most ambitious and powerful ruler, the Han reached its peak. He expanded the empire's borders through military campaigns against the Xiongnu nomads to the north, and extended influence into Central and Southeast Asia. Envoys like Zhang Qian helped open the Silk Road, linking China to distant lands and fostering trade in silk, spices, and ideas. This period also saw cultural and technological flourishing. Art, poetry, and science thrived, and historians began carefully recording China's past. However, rapid expansion and the growth of wealthy estates created social strains. Power became concentrated among elite families, and court politics grew increasingly complex. Despite these challenges, the Western Han's legacy endured. Its governance, culture, and unity laid the foundation for China's future. But internal tensions and unrest would soon disrupt this golden age, setting the stage for the short-lived Xin Dynasty. The Xin Dynasty, 923 CE. In the year 9 CE, the rhythm of the Han Dynasty was suddenly interrupted. A powerful court official named Wang Mang stepped forward and declared that the mandate of heaven, the divine right to rule, had passed to him. With this bold claim, he ended the Han and founded a new dynasty, the Xin. Wang Mang was a man of vision, deeply committed to reform. He saw inequality rising like a tide, drowning the lives of ordinary people. In response, he moved swiftly to reshape the empire. Slavery was abolished. Lands held by the wealthy were seized and redistributed. Laws were rewritten to protect the poor and restore a sense of fairness across the land. But visions, no matter how noble, must face the weight of the world. The elite resisted him fiercely. Those whose power was rooted in vast estates and old privileges did not yield easily. They undermined his reforms, working behind closed doors to preserve their wealth. And as this struggle played out in the court, the heavens themselves seemed to turn away. The Yellow River, the lifeblood of the North, burst its banks. It split and surged into new courses, flooding fields and homes and displacing millions. Crops failed, hunger spread, and with it, anger. Peasant uprisings ignited across the empire, many seeing Wang Mang not as a savior, but as a source of their suffering. His hold on power slipped with each passing season. In the year 23 CE, rebels stormed the capital. Inside the once mighty Weiyang Palace, the Xin Emperor met a violent end at the hands of an enraged mob. His dynasty, which had promised so much, lasted only 14 years. And yet, in the silence that followed, the people looked once more to the past, to the memory of the Han. Though shaken and scattered, the dynasty's legacy still lingered like embers in ash. From that quiet, a revival would begin. The Han would rise again. The Eastern Han Dynasty, 25 220 CE. Out of the chaos left by the fall of the Qin, a familiar name returned to the throne. Liu Shu, known to history as Emperor Guangwu, restored the Han Dynasty, not in its old capital of Chang'an, but farther east in Luoyang. This rebirth of the Han marked the beginning of the Eastern Han Era, a time of recovery, resilience, and renewal. With support from powerful landowners and a rising merchant class, the empire once again found stability. Under Emperors Ming and Zhang, the dynasty regained its strength. The northern frontier was secured through decisive campaigns against the Xiongnu, who had long troubled the empire's peace. And to the far west, the general Ban Chao carved a path through Central Asia, reviving the Great Silk Road. Trade and diplomacy flourished, reaching as far as the shores of the Caspian Sea. From these distant routes came not just silk and spices, but ideas. Among them was Buddhism, arriving quietly but destined to shape the spiritual life of China for centuries. This era was not only one of strength, but of brilliance. It was during the Eastern Han that Kai Lun, a court eunuch, perfected the art of papermaking, replacing silk and bamboo with a material both humble and revolutionary. In doing so, he laid the groundwork for a new age of learning and record-keeping. Elsewhere, the scholar and inventor Zhang Heng gazed at the stars and measured the movements of the Earth. His seismograph, one of the first of its kind, revealed tremors from afar, proof that even in ancient times, science could listen to the whispers of the Earth. China's reach extended across both land and sea. Roman envoys, it is said, found their way to Han ports, seeking connection with the empire at the other end of the world. It was a time when China's influence stretched like a vast web through trade, ideas, and innovation. But as with all great heights, shadows gathered slowly. Court factions began to stir. The power of eunuchs grew unchecked, and land fell increasingly into the hands of the wealthy. Peasants, burdened by tax and hardship, began to rise in rebellion. The foundations, once so carefully rebuilt, began to crack. Still, the Eastern Han left behind more than troubles. It left knowledge, innovation, and the deep imprint of a civilization reaching toward the world and the heavens. The Six Dynasties Era, AD 220, 589. With the fall of the Han, the great empire, once bound by a single will, fractured into many. What followed was an age of disunity, a long and shifting landscape of dynasties, each rising and falling in turn, each claiming the mandate of heaven as its own. This was the Six Dynasties Era, a time when northern and southern courts stood divided, and the heart of China pulsed through conflict and change. Warlords ruled in place of emperors. Great families wielded power once held by the throne. Armies marched, borders shifted, and the people flowed across the land, seeking safety in the shadow of each new regime. Yet even in this fractured world, China did not stand still. In the south, scholars and poets found refuge in quieter courts, where brush and ink became tools of survival as much as beauty. Landscapes were painted not only on silk, but in words, evoking nature as a mirror of the soul. In the north, despite the rule of non-Han peoples, Chinese traditions endured and blended, creating new forms of governance, belief, and art. Buddhism, once a whisper along trade routes, took deeper root in the hearts of the people. Monasteries rose like sanctuaries from the chaos, offering both spiritual refuge and centers of learning. Translations of sacred texts flourished, and Chinese thinkers began to shape the religion into something uniquely their own. The Six Dynasties era was not a golden age of empire, but of endurance. It was a time when civilization bent without breaking, when identity was questioned and reshaped, and when seeds were planted in the broken soil that would later bloom into unity. And though the skies were often clouded by war, the spirit of China, its language, its thought, its unbroken sense of self, remained steady, waiting for the day it would rise once more. The Three Kingdoms, AD 220–280. As the Han Dynasty waned beneath the weight of corruption and unrest, the empire began to fracture. The court, once a symbol of unity, fell prey to infighting, its power eroded by rival consorts, scheming eunuchs, and the growing grip of wealthy families. Then, in the year 184, the Yellow Turban Rebellion swept across the land, and with it came the storm that shattered what remained of imperial order. Out of the chaos, warlords rose like mountains from a broken plain. Armies marched, alliances crumbled, and from the ashes of the Han, three great realms took form: Wei in the north, Shu in the southwest, and Wu in the southeast. Each claimed the right to rule. Each dreamt of uniting China beneath its banner. In the north, the formidable Cao Cao secured dominion with sharp mind and sharper sword. His son, Cao Pi, would bring an end to the Han in name as well as deed, founding the Wei Dynasty in 220. In response, Liu Bei, champion of Shu, and Sun Quan of Wu declared their own sovereignty, and the age of the Three Kingdoms began. It was a time of unrelenting war, but also of legendary deeds. Strategists like Zhuge Liang, warriors like Guan Yu, and rulers both noble and ruthless shaped a drama that has echoed across the centuries, immortalized in Romance of the Three Kingdoms, where history and myth are forever intertwined. Beneath the clamor of battle, deeper currents stirred. The authority of a single emperor faded, replaced by powerful regional lords. The old structures of governance gave way to new patterns of rule as aristocratic families and warlords carved their domains into the bones of the empire. In 266, a new force emerged from within the north, the Jin Dynasty, born of the Wei. By 280, it had subdued Shu and Wu, and for a fleeting moment, China stood whole again. But this unity, hard-won and short-lived, would not endure. The cycle of division had not yet run its course. The Jin Dynasty, AD 266, 420. After the long years of division and strife, the Jin Dynasty emerged to reunite China, bringing an end to the age of the Three Kingdoms. For a brief, flickering moment, the dream of a single empire was restored. The ancient heartlands once again bowed to a single throne, and the wounds of war seemed poised to heal. But unity proved delicate. Beneath the surface, rivalries simmered. The imperial court, rather than guiding the realm to peace, fell into bitter conflict. The War of the Eight Princes, a brutal struggle among royal Qin, tore through the state's foundations, draining its strength and shattering the fragile order from within. As the empire faltered, new threats surged in from the north. Non-Han peoples, long kept at bay, rose in rebellion, capturing the storied capitals of Luoyang and Chang'an. In the face of these invasions, the court was forced to flee. The dynasty's remnants crossed the Yangtze River, seeking refuge in the safer lands of the south. There, in 317, Prince Sima Rui declared himself emperor, founding the Eastern Jin Dynasty with its capital at Jiankang, modern-day Nanjing. While the north splintered into a patchwork of kingdoms and tribal states, the Eastern Jin preserved a semblance of imperial life in the south, sustaining traditions and culture in the shadow of loss. To historians, this age is divided in two. The Western Jin, anchored in the ancient northern capitals, and the Eastern Jin, a court in exile that kept the ember of unity alive amidst a land once more divided. The 16 Kingdoms, AD 304–439. After the Jin dynasty lost its hold on northern China, the land gently divided into many smaller states, known as the 16 Kingdoms. These kingdoms were mostly led by non-Han peoples, groups like the Xiongnu, Xianbei, Jie, Dai, and Qiang, who were ancestors of later Turkic, Mongolic, and Tibetan peoples. Though often seen as outsiders, many of these rulers had embraced parts of Chinese culture and ways of governing, blending old traditions with new. Some, like the Qiang and Xiongnu, had lived near the Great Wall regions for generations, becoming part of the landscape itself. This time was marked by frequent conflicts and shifting borders, which brought hardship to northern China. Many Han Chinese moved southward, seeking safety along the Yangtze River and its fertile delta. This migration slowly transformed the southern lands, weaving new threads into the rich tapestry of China's culture and people. The Northern and Southern Dynasties, AD 420–589. In the early 5th century, China entered a long period of division, known as the Northern and Southern Dynasties. The land was quietly split between two worlds, one in the north, the other in the south, each ruled by its own dynasty. In the south, a line of Han Chinese dynasties took root, beginning with the Eastern Jin and followed by the Liu Song, Southern Qi, Liang, and Chen. Their capital was at Jiankang, today's Nanjing. These southern courts held firm against northern invasions, nurturing the heart of traditional Chinese culture and life during these changing times. To the north, the Northern Wei dynasty rose, founded by the Xianbei, a nomadic people who brought the northern lands together. Over time, this dynasty divided into smaller northern states: Eastern Wei, Western Wei, Northern Qi, and Northern Zhou, led by Xianbei rulers or Han Chinese families closely connected with them. As years passed, the Xianbei embraced Han culture, blending seamlessly into the rich fabric of Chinese society. Though divided, this era was also a time of spiritual growth. Buddhism spread gently across the land, reaching both north and south. In the southern courts, debates arose about the place of this new faith. Yet, by the end of the era, Buddhism and Taoism found a peaceful balance, weaving together to enrich the spiritual and cultural life of the people. After centuries of division and change during the 6 Dynasties period, China began a new chapter, the Mid-Imperial Era. This time brought with it efforts to reunify the land, thoughtful reforms, and a gentle revival of culture and economy. The dynasties of this period quietly rebuilt and reshaped the foundations of the state, setting the stage for the bright and flourishing Tang Dynasty that was soon to come. The Sui Dynasty, 581–618. The short-lived Sui Dynasty was a pivotal chapter in Chinese history, bridging the gap between centuries of disunity and the golden age of the Tang Dynasty. Founded by Emperor Wen in 581 CE as the successor to the Northern Zhou, the Sui Dynasty achieved the monumental task of reunifying China by conquering the southern Chen in 589 CE, ending nearly 3 centuries of political division. The Sui rulers pioneered several transformative institutions that shaped the future imperial administration. These included the establishment of the 3 departments and 6 ministries system, a sophisticated governmental framework that improved bureaucracy management. They also introduced the imperial examination system, which for the first time allowed officials to be selected from commoners based on merit rather than birth, a revolutionary step toward bureaucratic efficiency and social mobility. Reforms to the military conscription system, notably improvements to the fubing system, and refinements to the equal field system of land distribution helped stabilize the population and consolidate state power. These policies fueled enormous population growth and amassed significant wealth for the imperial treasury. The dynasty also enforced standardized coinage, facilitating trade and economic integration across the empire. Buddhism, which had taken root in previous centuries, became a prominent and officially supported religion under the Sui. The Sui are also renowned for their ambitious mega-construction projects. Foremost among these was the Grand Canal, which linked the imperial capitals of Daxing, modern Chang'an, and Luoyang with the prosperous southeast and further northeast border regions, facilitating grain shipment and rapid troop movement. Additionally, the Great Wall was expanded to bolster defenses against northern tribes. Despite these achievements, the dynasty's ambitions led to overstretch. The Goguryeo-Sui War, a series of massive but disastrous invasions of the Korean peninsula, severely strained the empire's resources. These military failures, combined with heavy taxation and forced labor demands, sparked widespread revolts that ultimately led to the dynasty's collapse in 618 CE. The Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907. The Tang Dynasty is often regarded as the golden age of Chinese civilization, a time marked by prosperity, stability, and remarkable creativity. This period saw significant developments in culture, art, literature, especially poetry and technology. Buddhism emerged as the predominant religion among the common people, deeply influencing society. The capital city, Chang'an, modern Xi'an, was the largest and most cosmopolitan city in the world during its time, serving as a hub of political power and international exchange. The dynasty began with Emperor Gaozu ascending the throne on June 18, 618, largely placed there by his son, Li Shimin, who became the second emperor known as Taizong, one of China's greatest rulers. Through combined military campaigns and diplomatic efforts, the Tang reduced threats from Central Asian tribes, extended the empire's borders, and established a tributary system with neighboring states. Notably, military victories in the Tarim Basin kept the vital Silk Road open, connecting Chang'an with Central Asia and distant Western lands. In the south, maritime trade flourished via ports such as Guangzhou, linking China to distant countries and encouraging a vibrant cosmopolitan culture enriched by foreign merchants and ideas. The Tang model of governance and culture was widely admired and adopted by neighboring countries, including Japan. Internally, the Grand Canal connected Chang'an with agricultural and economic centers in the east and south, facilitating the flow of grain and goods. The famous Buddhist monk Xuanzang journeyed to India and returned with over 600 Buddhist texts and sacred relics, exemplifying the era's deep religious and scholarly engagement. The Tang government was organized under the 3 departments and 6 ministries system, a sophisticated bureaucratic structure that balanced policy drafting, reviewing, and implementation. While initially led by royal family members and aristocrats, this system increasingly included scholar officials selected through imperial examinations, setting a lasting pattern in Chinese governance. Under the Tang, the equal field system ensured that all land was owned by the emperor and distributed to households according to size. Landholders were conscripted for military service through the fubing system, which maintained a capable army without overly burdening the treasury. Over time, however, standing armies replaced conscription, and land increasingly fell into private and religious hands. The dynasty reached its height under Empress Wu Zetian, the only officially recognized empress regnant in Chinese history, and during the reign of Emperor Xuanzong, who presided over an empire stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the Aral Sea, governing a population of at least 50 million. The period saw the flowering of Chinese poetry, with luminaries like Li Bai and Du Fu producing some of the greatest works in literary history. However, the An Lushan Rebellion, 755-763, marked a turning point. The rebellion devastated the population, weakened the central government, and disrupted the economy. In its aftermath, regional military governors called jiadushi gained significant autonomy as the central government struggled to maintain control. Loss of land tax revenue forced the government to rely heavily on a salt monopoly. Border territories were lost, and formerly submissive states turned hostile. Despite these challenges, civil society persisted and cultural life continued. In the later Tang period, internal strife worsened with revolts by military governors, factional conflicts among scholar officials, and the rise of powerful eunuchs. The Huangqiao Rebellion, 874-884, devastated the empire further, with the sack of Guangzhou and massacre of its foreign merchant communities symbolizing the turmoil. By 881, the twin capitals, Luoyang and Chang'an, had fallen. To suppress the rebellion, the court increasingly depended on ethnic Han and Turkic warlords, whose growing power ultimately hastened the dynasty's fall and ushered in an era of division. Throughout this time, ethnic Turkic groups like the Shatuo Turks played crucial military roles in defending the dynasty and countering rival powers such as the Uyghur Khaganate. Leaders like Zhuye Cixin, later Li Guochang, supported the Tang in battles that contributed to the decline of Uyghur power and helped maintain Tang influence over the steppe regions. The Five Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period, 907 to 960. Following the collapse of the Tang Dynasty, China entered a turbulent era of political fragmentation known as the Five Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period, lasting from 907 to 960. During these 5 decades, China was effectively a multi-state system, with various regimes competing for control and influence. In northern China, the traditional imperial heartland, 5 successive regimes quickly replaced each other: the later Liang, later Tang, later Jin, later Han, and later Zhou dynasties. Among these northern rulers, the later Tang, later Jin, and later Han were founded by Sinicized Shatuo Turks, a Turkic nomadic group that had assimilated into Chinese culture and ruled over a majority Han Chinese population. Meanwhile, southern and western China were home to more stable, smaller kingdoms ruled mostly by ethnic Han Chinese families. These collectively became known as the Ten Kingdoms, which maintained a degree of independence and cultural development during the era of northern disunity. Amidst this fragmentation, the strategic region known as the 16 Prefectures, a key area along the Great Wall, was ceded to the rising Khitan Liao dynasty. This loss significantly weakened China's northern defenses against nomadic powers, exposing the heartland to external threats. Elsewhere, the centuries-long Chinese prefecture of Vietnam seized the opportunity to establish lasting independence, ending centuries of Chinese imperial control. The constant warfare and instability in the north led to large-scale southward migration of the population. This demographic shift further accelerated the southward movement of China's cultural and economic centers, laying important foundations for later development. The period concluded with a decisive coup led by Zhou Guangyin, a general of the later Zhou dynasty. In 960, he established the Song Dynasty, which would ultimately defeat the remaining 10 kingdoms and reunify China, restoring political stability after nearly half a century of division. The late Imperial period marks a transformative era in Chinese history, beginning with the political reunification under the Song Dynasty in 960 and extending through an age of cultural, technological, and economic brilliance, juxtaposed with military challenges from nomadic neighbors. This era is defined by the coexistence and rivalry of multiple dynasties: the Han Chinese-led Song Dynasty and the Sinicized nomadic states of the Liao, Jin, and Western Xia, which shaped the political landscape of northern and western China until the eventual Mongol conquest in the late 13th century. The period saw profound advancements in governance, science, trade, and the arts, laying the foundation for many aspects of classical Chinese civilization. The Song, Liao, Jin, and Western Xia dynasties, 960 to 1279. In 960, Emperor Taizhou founded the Song Dynasty, establishing its capital at Kaifeng, then called Bianjing. By 979, the Song had reunified most of China proper, although large border regions remained under the control of Sinicized nomadic empires. To the north and northeast, the Khitan-led Liao dynasty, 907–125, ruled over Manchuria, Mongolia, and parts of northern China. In the northwest, the Tangut tribes established the Western Xia dynasty, 1032–1227, in the regions now known as Gansu, Shanxi, and Ningxia. Determined to reclaim the strategically vital 16 prefectures, the Song launched several military campaigns against the Liao early in their reign, but these all ended in failure. In 1004, the Liao cavalry swept across the North China plain, reaching the outskirts of Kaifeng and forcing the Song to submit. This led to the Chanyuan Treaty, which imposed heavy annual tributes from the Song treasury to the Liao. This treaty marked a significant reversal of Chinese dominance in the tributary system, but the economic interaction that followed, particularly the Song's purchase of Liao goods, stimulated the Song economy and replenished its treasury. The treaty also encouraged further Sinicization within the Liao, as cross-border trade and cultural exchange weakened the nomadic military lifestyle that had sustained their power. Similar diplomatic and economic dynamics developed between the Song and the later Jin Dynasty. The Jin Dynasty arose from a Jurchen revolt against the Liao in 1115. By 1125, the Jin decisively defeated the Liao, causing the latter's collapse and forcing remnants of its court to flee westward to establish the Kara-Kitai Empire, also known as the Western Liao Dynasty. Following this, the Jin invaded the Song Dynasty. In 1127, they sacked Kaifeng in the catastrophic Jingkang incident, ending the Northern Song Dynasty and capturing the emperor and much of the court. The surviving Song rulers regrouped further south, establishing their capital at Hangzhou and initiating the Southern Song Dynasty, which ruled over territories south of the Huai River. During this period, China was divided between the Southern Song, the Jin Dynasty in the north, and the Western Xia Dynasty in the northwest. This tripartite division lasted until the Mongol conquests of the 13th century. Western Xia fell in 1227, Jin in 1234, and the Southern Song Dynasty finally succumbed in 1279. Despite military setbacks and territorial losses, the Song Dynasty is widely regarded as the pinnacle of classical Chinese civilization. Technological and economic advancements propelled the Song economy to new heights, supported by a population surpassing 100 million and unprecedented improvements in agriculture, particularly rice cultivation. Both Kaifeng and Hangzhou were among the world's largest cities at their time, fostering vibrant urban cultures and civil societies. While land routes westward were often blocked by nomadic empires, maritime trade flourished across Southeast Asia and beyond, spreading Song coinage and ideas. Chinese merchants pioneered the use of maritime insurance to mitigate the risks of long-distance sea voyages, facilitated by advances such as the compass and large wooden ships. The Song period witnessed remarkable scientific and technological innovation, led by scholar officials such as Su Song and Shen Kuo. Inventions like the hydro-mechanical astronomical clock, continuous power-transmitting chain drives, woodblock printing, and paper currency emerged during this time. These breakthroughs solidified the Song's reputation as a golden age of Chinese innovation. Political life was marked by ideological debates and reforms, most notably between reformers led by Wang Anshi and conservatives led by Sima Guang. Neo-Confucianism, formulated by thinkers such as Zhu Xi, became the dominant philosophy by the late Song. Literary and artistic achievements flourished with grand works such as the historical narrative Ziji Tongjian, comprehensive mirror to aid in government, the landscape painting along the river during the Qingming festival, and the Buddhist art of Lin Tingyi. The invention of movable type printing further democratized access to knowledge. In military affairs, the Song pioneered the practical use of gunpowder, leading to a new generation of firearms and siege weapons. With their survival dependent on defending the Yangtze and Huai rivers, the Southern Song assembled China's first standing navy in 1132. Their paddle-wheel warships, armed with trebuchets and incendiary gunpowder bombs, achieved notable victories against Jin forces, including the battles of Tangdao and Kaishi. However, the Song's advances abruptly ended with the Mongol invasions. After decades of fierce resistance, the southern Song capital Hangzhou fell in 1276. The dynasty's last navy was destroyed in 1279 at the Battle of Yamen, marking the end of Song rule and the beginning of Mongol dominance in China. The Yuan Dynasty, 1271–1368. In 1271, the Yuan Dynasty was formally proclaimed by Kublai Khan, the great Khan of the Mongol Empire and grandson of Genghis Khan. Declaring himself Emperor of China, Kublai united the vast Mongol territories and established the Yuan Dynasty as the first conquest dynasty in Chinese history to rule over the entirety of China proper. The Yuan capital was established at Kanbalik, also known as Dadu, modern-day Beijing, a political and cultural center that would influence successive Chinese regimes for centuries. The Mongol conquests prior to the Yuan's establishment had brought an end to the Jin Dynasty in northern China, and after a protracted and brutal war, the southern Song dynasty finally fell in 1279, marking the completion of Mongol control over China. This unification under Mongol rule coincided with the largest territorial extent of the Eastern Mongol Empire, encompassing modern China and neighboring regions of East Asia. The Yuan dynasty oversaw a period often called Pax Mongolica, when much of the Asian continent was unified under Mongol rule, facilitating unprecedented cultural exchange, trade, and travel across the Silk Road. The first time this vast network was controlled by a single power. The dynasty maintained and expanded the extensive road networks and a postal system that connected the empire's far-flung regions. Maritime trade flourished as well, with southern ports such as Guangzhou and Hangzhou becoming the busiest in the world. The era also witnessed the arrival of famous travelers like the Venetian Marco Polo, whose detailed accounts of the Yuan court and Chinese civilization inspired generations of Europeans fascinated by the riches of the East. Economically, the Yuan dynasty was notable for establishing paper currency, known as jiaochao, as the dominant medium of exchange, a development that would have lasting influence on Chinese and global monetary systems, despite later issues of hyperinflation contributing to the dynasty's decline. Though the Mongol rulers adopted many aspects of Chinese culture and governance, they maintained distinct Mongolian customs and upheld a rigid social hierarchy that favored Mongols and other non-Han groups over the native Han Chinese majority. This shift weakened the traditional scholar-official elite and sparked vibrant growth in popular culture, including new forms of drama, vernacular literature, and poetic innovation such as Zhou variety shows and sank songs. The Yuan period was marked by significant demographic upheaval. Before Mongol rule, China's population was estimated at around 120 million, but by 1300, census figures had halved. Scholars debate the causes, ranging from administrative failure and population displacement to warfare and devastating plague outbreaks, which recurred through the 14th century. Increasing dissatisfaction with Mongol rule grew amid frequent natural disasters and widespread government corruption. This unrest culminated in numerous peasant uprisings during the 1340s. The most successful of these was led by Zhou Yuanzhang, who emerged victorious after the decisive naval battle of Lake Poyang. In 1368, Zhou proclaimed himself the first emperor of the Ming Dynasty and captured Kanbalik, effectively ending Yuan dominance in China. The Mongol rulers retreated to Mongolia, where they maintained a rump regime, but their imperial reign over China was concluded. The Yuan dynasty remains a pivotal chapter in Chinese history, a time of vast cultural fusion, economic expansion, and transcontinental connectivity, but also of profound social transformation and turbulence under foreign rule. The Ming Dynasty, 1368 to 1644. The Ming Dynasty was founded in 1368 by Zhou Yuanzhang, a former peasant who rose to power through rebellion against the declining Yuan dynasty. Proclaiming himself the Hongwu Emperor, Zhou established a strong, agrarian-based state, with its initial capital at Nanjing. Later, during the reign of the Yongle Emperor, the capital was moved north to Beijing, which would remain China's political center for centuries. Urbanization and economic complexity grew during the Ming era, with expanding population fueling the rise of large cities such as Nanjing and Beijing. These urban centers fostered the development of private industries specializing in goods like paper, silk, cotton, and porcelain. However, most towns were still relatively small, with markets focused primarily on food and everyday necessities. Despite the rise of Neo-Confucianism, a philosophical movement promoting intellectual introspection and sometimes xenophobic tendencies, China under the early Ming dynasty was not isolated from the world. Foreign trade expanded, especially with Japan, and Chinese merchants sailed far into the Indian Ocean, reaching as far as East Africa, propelled by the legendary maritime expeditions led by the eunuch Admiral Zheng He. The Hongwu Emperor, unique among Chinese dynasty founders for his humble peasant origins, emphasized agriculture as the foundation of the state. Land reforms dismantled the neo-feudal estates of previous dynasties, redistributing land to independent peasant owners and outlawing private slavery. This fostered a more equitable agricultural society and helped alleviate some of the poverty inherited from earlier regimes. Later in the dynasty, as central control waned, commerce and private industries revived. The Ming government was highly centralized and autocratic, with the emperor wielding vast power. To manage the complex bureaucracy, the emperor relied on the Grand Secretariat to handle petitions, edicts, tax records, and administration. However, this very bureaucracy would later become rigid and unable to adapt, contributing to the dynasty's eventual decline. Under the Yongle Emperor, Ming China projected power beyond its borders. A powerful navy with massive four-masted ships displacing 1,500 tons was built alongside a standing army of around 1 million troops. Ming forces conquered and occupied Vietnam for 2 decades, expanded influence into Eastern Central Asia, and maintained dominance over several maritime Asian states through tribute missions. Domestically, infrastructure projects like the expansion of the Grand Canal stimulated internal trade, and industrial production surged, with over 100,000 tons of iron produced annually. The Imperial Palace complex in Beijing, the Forbidden City, was constructed to grand splendor during this period. However, the Ming Dynasty also faced formidable external threats. In 1449, the Oirat Mongol leader Xin Dynasty invaded northern China and captured the Zhengtong Emperor at the Battle of Tumu. This defeat forced the Ming onto the defensive along the northern frontier and led to major rebuilding and reinforcement of the Great Wall of China. Most of the surviving sections of the Great Wall today were built or restored by the Ming, featuring enhanced brick and granite fortifications, redesigned watchtowers, and strategically placed cannons. After Yongg's death, Ming China adopted an increasingly isolationist maritime policy. The treasure voyages ceased, and strict maritime prohibitions were enacted to ban Chinese from overseas sailing. European traders arriving during the Age of Discovery were rebuffed or repelled by the Ming Navy, notably the Portuguese at Tuan. These restrictions, combined with persistent foreign demand for trade, encouraged widespread piracy along the southeast coast, especially by Japanese wokou and pirates from Taiwan and the Philippines. Eventually, trade was reluctantly permitted in limited ports such as Macau, controlled by the Portuguese from 1557 onward, while the Spanish in Manila facilitated massive silver inflows from the Americas into China. The Ming also engaged in significant military campaigns beyond China's borders. The dynasty intervened deeply in the Japanese invasions of Korea, 1592 to 1598, successfully expelling the Japanese and restoring the Joseon Dynasty, a loyal tributary. Yet at home, internal pressures mounted. The Manchu tribes, originally subordinate to Ming authority in Manchuria, unified under the leadership of Nuahachi and established what would become the Qing Dynasty, eventually overrunning Ming defenses at the Shanhai Pass, the last major northern stronghold. Natural disasters, such as the catastrophic 1556 Shanxi earthquake that killed hundreds of thousands, coupled with internal corruption, peasant uprisings, and military overstretch, eroded the dynasty's foundations. By the mid-17th century, the Ming dynasty was struggling to maintain control amid rising external and internal threats. The Qing Dynasty, the last imperial chapter of China, 1644 to 1912. The Qing Dynasty, founded in 1644 by the Manchus, was the final imperial dynasty to rule over China. Emerging from the northeastern lands beyond the Great Wall, the Manchus, originally known as the Jurchens, united under the leadership of Nuahachi and later his son Hong Taiji, who declared the Qing dynasty in 1636. This new dynasty would not only inherit the vast territories of the Ming, but expand them, nearly doubling China's size. In 1644, as the Ming Dynasty faltered under the pressure of rebellions and natural disasters, the peasant uprising led by Li Zicheng captured Beijing. The last Ming emperor, Chongzhen, took his own life, ending a long chapter of Chinese history. The Manchus allied with Ming general Wu Sangui, seizing Beijing and establishing it as their capital. Over the following decades, the Qing subdued remaining Ming loyalists and solidified their rule over the entire country. The Qing rulers skillfully blended their inner Asian traditions with the Confucian principles of Chinese governance. The Manchus imposed new cultural regulations, such as the mandatory queue hairstyle for Han Chinese men, while allowing ordinary civilians to maintain traditional dress. The elite bannermen, a military aristocracy under the Eight Banners system, were given privileges and land, but forbidden from engaging in trade or manual labor, underscoring the rigid social order the Qing maintained. Under the reign of emperors like Kangxi, the empire flourished culturally and militarily. Kangxi commissioned the Kangxi Dictionary, a monumental work cataloging the Chinese language in unprecedented detail. The dynasty expanded its borders further through conquest and diplomacy, bringing Taiwan under control and negotiating borders with Russia in treaties like Nerchinsk. By the late 18th century, under Qianlong's reign, the Qing Empire reached its greatest extent, ruling over more than a third of the world's population and boasting the largest economy of its time. Yet, beneath this grandeur, challenges stirred. The 19th century brought internal unrest and external threats. The Opium Wars with Britain forced humiliating treaties, ceding Hong Kong and legalizing opium imports that would poison society. Massive uprisings, such as the Taiping Rebellion, led by the self-proclaimed Heavenly King Hong Xiuquan, devastated the population, killing millions and weakening imperial authority. Efforts at reform, like the self-strengthening movement and the Tongji Restoration, sought to modernize the military and industry. Yet internal court politics and foreign pressures stifled many reforms. The 100 Days Reform was swiftly crushed by conservative forces wary of rapid change. At the dawn of the 20th century, the Boxer Uprising erupted, a violent reaction against foreign influence and Christian missionaries. Although initially supported by the Qing court, the rebellion was crushed by an international coalition, further weakening the dynasty. In the final years, the Qing government introduced reforms, including the abolition of the imperial examination system, but revolutionary ideas were spreading rapidly. On October 10, 1911, the Wuchang Uprising ignited a revolution that would end over 2 millennia of imperial rule. By January 1, 1912, the Republic of China was proclaimed, closing the chapter on the Qing Dynasty and Imperial China. The Qing Dynasty's legacy is one of vast expansion, cultural achievements, and profound challenges. It stands as a testament to a complex era of change, where tradition met modernity, and where the last echoes of ancient imperial power gave way to a new dawn. Modern China, a nation in transformation. The dawn of the 20th century marked the end of millennia-old imperial rule in China and the beginning of an era defined by revolution, conflict, and profound social and political change. Modern China's story is one of struggle for unity, sovereignty, and modernization amidst internal turmoil and foreign intrusion. From the fragile beginnings of the Republic of China to the rise of competing political forces and the devastation of war, this period reshaped the nation's destiny and laid the foundation for the China known today. The Republic of China since 1912. The Provisional Government of the Republic of China was formed in Nanjing on March 12, 1912, signaling the official end of imperial rule. Sun Yat-sen, widely revered as the father of modern China, became the first provisional president. However, he soon ceded power to Yuan Shikai, a powerful general commanding the new army. Yuan's leadership marked the beginning of a tumultuous period in which hopes for a stable republic were quickly challenged. In the years that followed, Yuan systematically dismantled the democratic framework, abolishing the national and provincial assemblies. His ambitions peaked in late 1915 when he declared himself emperor of a new empire of China, aiming to establish an absolute monarchy. This move was met with fierce opposition from his subordinates and sparked widespread unrest. Faced with growing rebellion, Yuan was forced to abdicate in March 1916 and died a few months later, leaving behind a fractured nation. Yuan Shikai's death created a power vacuum that plunged China into the chaotic warlord era. The Republican government, weakened by years of internal strife, was nearly shattered. Throughout this period, regional military leaders, warlords, jockeyed for control, dividing much of the country into competing territories. Amidst this instability, intellectuals and reformers launched the New Culture movement, seeking to rejuvenate Chinese society and governance. The year 1919 brought the May 4th movement, a watershed moment ignited by outrage over the Treaty of Versailles. The treaty awarded former German concessions in Shandong province to Japan, sparking nationwide protests. The movement became a moral victory when the Chinese government refused to sign the treaty, and the cabinet was forced to resign. The May 4th movement ignited waves of nationalism and demands for modernization that continued to shape China's political landscape. The 1920s and 1930s were marked by intellectual ferment and political upheaval. As historian Patricia Ebry observed, ideals such as nationalism, democracy, progress, and freedom were embraced, while imperialism, warlordism, feudalism, and autocracy were rejected. This period saw intense debates over how China could modernize while preserving its cultural identity and sovereignty. Sun Yat-sen, determined to unify the fragmented country, established a revolutionary base in Guangzhou and welcomed Soviet support. He formed a fragile alliance with the newly founded Chinese Communist Party, CCP, setting the stage for future conflicts. After Sun's death in 1925, Chiang Kai-shek took control of the Nationalist Party, Kuomintang, KMT, and led the Northern Expedition 1926 to 1927 to defeat warlords in the South and Central China, nominally uniting the country under the nationalist government in Nanjing. However, the alliance between the nationalists and communists soon fractured. In 1927, Chiang launched a brutal purge against the communists, driving them from power. The CCP regrouped, undertaking the Long March, a legendary retreat across harsh terrain, where Mao Zedong emerged as the party's new leader, laying the foundation for communist guerrilla warfare and ideology. The decades-long rivalry between the KMT and CCP was temporarily set aside during the Second Sino-Japanese War, 1937 to 1945, when the two parties formed a tenuous united front against the Japanese invasion. The war was devastating. Japan committed widespread atrocities against Chinese civilians, including biological warfare and scorched earth tactics known as the Three Alls policy: kill all, burn all, loot all. Despite immense suffering, China's role as one of the major Allied powers in World War II solidified its place on the global stage. After Japan's defeat in 1945, civil war resumed between the nationalists and communists. By 1949, the CCP had gained control over most of mainland China. According to historian Odd Arne Westad, the communists succeeded due to superior military strategy, their ability to appeal to peasants, and the alienation of Chiang Kai-shek's government from many interest groups. The civil war was brutal, with mass casualties and atrocities committed by both sides. The nationalist government, led by Chiang, retreated to Taiwan, where it had taken control after Japan's surrender in 1945. For decades, the Republic of China, ROC, government in Taiwan claimed to be the legitimate government of all China. Until the early 1970s, the ROC was recognized internationally by the United Nations, the United States, and most Western countries. This recognition shifted in 1971 when the People's Republic of China, PRC, replaced the ROC in the United Nations. In Taiwan, the KMT ruled under martial law until 1987, suppressing political dissent in the name of defending against communist infiltration and preparing for a possible return to the mainland. However, the 1990s ushered in a period of democratic reform. The old legislative bodies were dissolved, restrictions on Taiwanese languages were lifted, and direct presidential elections were held, reflecting a major political transformation. Today, the Republic of China on Taiwan maintains a complex and contested political status. Recognized by only a handful of nations, it operates as a vibrant democracy while remaining at the center of ongoing debates about sovereignty, identity, and the future of China itself. The People's Republic of China. Since 1949, major combat in the Chinese Civil War concluded in 1949 when the nationalist Kuomintang, KMT, government retreated to Taiwan, maintaining control only over a few islands, while the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, took control of mainland China. On October 1, 1949, Mao Zedong proclaimed the founding of the People's Republic of China, PRC, commonly referred to as Communist China or Red China. The early decades of the PRC were marked by radical political campaigns and economic plans. The Great Leap Forward aimed at rapidly transforming China's agrarian economy into a socialist society through industrialization and collectivization, resulted in a catastrophic famine, causing tens of millions of deaths. Mao's government also executed mass campaigns against landowners, implemented forced labor through the Laogai system, and oversaw numerous atrocities. In 1966, Mao launched the Cultural Revolution to preserve communist ideology by removing perceived enemies within the party and society, leading to a decade of social upheaval, violence, and destruction until Mao's death in 1976. Amid Cold War tensions, China and the Soviet Union split politically and ideologically, prompting China to pursue its own national defense and industrial development through the Third Front Campaign, focusing on strategic interior regions. In 1972, China initiated diplomatic relations with the United States, symbolized by President Nixon's historic visit to Beijing. The same year, the PRC replaced the Republic of China as China's representative in the United Nations, securing permanent Security Council membership. After Mao's death, a power struggle ended, with Deng Xiaoping emerging as the paramount leader. Deng spearheaded sweeping economic reforms beginning in 1978 that transitioned China from a centrally planned economy to a mixed system, featuring market socialism under socialism with Chinese characteristics. These reforms dismantled collective farming, encouraged private enterprise, and established special economic zones like Shenzhen, spurring rapid growth and urbanization. Despite economic progress, political reform remained tightly controlled. The 1989 Tiananmen Square protests calling for democracy and anti-corruption ended with a military crackdown resulting in many deaths and global condemnation. During the 1990s and early 2000s, under leaders Jiang Zemin and Zhou Rongji, China experienced sustained high economic growth, lifting an estimated 150 million people out of poverty and joining the World Trade Organization in 2001. The PRC regained sovereignty over Hong Kong in 1997 and Macau in 1999, designating them as special administrative regions. The government also faced environmental degradation and social inequalities, especially between urban and rural areas. Under Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao, efforts were made to address resource distribution and rural poverty, though challenges remained. In recent years, concerns over human rights have intensified. Reports accuse the PRC of detaining over 3 million Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities in internment camps in Xinjiang, a claim the government denies while asserting counter-terrorism efforts. International scrutiny led to partial closures or repurposing of these facilities by 2019, although reports of arbitrary detention continue. The COVID-19 pandemic originated in Wuhan, Hubei province in late 2019, triggering worldwide health and economic crises and prompting global lockdowns. Epilogue. From the long struggles of revolution and turmoil, China emerged as a nation of enduring strength and transformation. The People's Republic, born from the ashes of civil war, embarked on a path of immense change, marked by hardship and resilience, by tragedy and renewal. Through campaigns that reshaped society and reforms that opened the door to new possibilities, China forged a unique journey, blending tradition, ideology, and modern ambition. Decades of rapid development lifted millions from poverty and turned China into a global economic force, a nation of innovation and vast cultural heritage. While political freedoms remained tightly held, the country's people adapted with ingenuity and determination, navigating the challenges of urbanization, social change, and the pursuit of prosperity. Yet China's story is not without complexity, its path intertwined with questions of human rights, environmental care, and the balance between unity and diversity. Through it all, the spirit of a vast and ancient civilization pulses with energy, creativity, and a will to thrive amid the shifting tides of history. Today, China stands at a crossroads of tradition and transformation, a country shaped by its past and driven by the hopes of future generations. It is a land where the echoes of emperors meet the hum of modern cities, where ancient wisdom coexists with cutting-edge technology. As the years unfold, China's story continues, an unfolding tapestry of perseverance, renewal, and change. Thank you for joining me on Chronicles at Dusk. Until our next story, may understanding and curiosity light your way.